Souls. There are 7 uniquely different souls, originally belonging to 7 different humans who fall into the underground. Most frequently, these humans end up dead. However, the one exception to this outcome is the player character in the game of Undertale. You play as a character known by the canonical name as Frisk to explore the underground and traverse through this new closed-off landscape, seemingly because down in the underground lurks monsters around every corner, in which you can choose to either befriend these dangerous foes or kill them mercilessly. No matter what decision you make, you will eventually come across these. These are known as souls. You, as the player character, also have a soul just like these, but yours is red, whilst the others are different colours. The intent for these human souls was to use them to break the barrier separating the human world from the underground, so the monsters can finally be free and live prosperous lives in harmony with human life. And your player character is a lot different compared to the humans who fell prior to make this long-term escape plan possible. The traits of kindness, bravery, patience, justice, integrity, and perseverance are what all of these different souls represent in terms of dominant personality traits that belong to humans prior. And you, as the player character, are the human and soul to represent determination. In the completely unintentional celebration of Undertale's 10th anniversary, because I came up with this idea completely unrelated to that because I thought it would be fun, for this video I decided to bring 2 of my favourite forms of content from 2 different media genres together to see which Blue Lock character fits each Undertale soul the best. If you are a frequent viewer of my channel, you have likely seen videos of mine where I've taken the niche of Blue Lock to cross it over with another niche of my interest, and this video will of course be no different. So then the likelihood I will find both Blue Lock and Undertale fans intertwined into one is not so high, so if you are one of these individuals, or maybe you're just interested with what this video has to offer, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button for more content like this. Let's start off from the bottom of the bunch and work our way up to the main soul of determination. So kicking us off is Perseverance. Which Blue Lock character personifies the trait of perseverance the most in the series? Well, let's read the definition of perseverance first. Perseverance is the quality of sticking to something despite difficulties, setbacks, or discouragement. It's about continuing to pursue your goals even when the going gets tough. Also to add on, it's to know when to change or adjust the methods to reach the end goal. We have a few candidates for this dominant personality trait. In fact, a lot of Blue Lock characters can fit this attribute very well, but I've cut down to 3 characters to talk about: Rin, Nagi, and Isagi. All 3 of these characters have had obvious setbacks and have had difficulties in what they want to pursue, but they continue to perform to reach their aims and or ideals. However, Nagi has been seen actively giving up on paths that don't provide him the results he wants to achieve his aspirations. The most famous example, and one that I still accept criticism for, is Nagi completely abandoning Agi's methods and practices for a temporary win and fixation withdrawal over Isagi from teaming with Reo. Taking such a shortcut means he couldn't handle the setbacks, even if they were to help him grow long term. So to speed it up, he took the easy route many times over and over again, until eventually he sees the consequences of his actions, only to take the easy route again by accepting Burasuta's deal, so I guess he doesn't have a lot of spine. Now for Rin and Isagi. Honestly, these are the 2 most well-known characters both from a personality perspective and with how frequently they get screen time. This argument for who represents perseverance was really down to these 2. So let's confront the facts. Rin, as far as we know, has never truly given up. He's vocalized quitting football before because his brother chose not to hold the same dream as him anymore, so it's debatable whether or not he's truly sticking with his goals at this point in the series. And for a while, he was not susceptible to change in his performance. Whilst Isagi has felt like his goals from the very start has felt like he wanted to make something of himself. He never necessarily gave up, more so that he's been placed in circumstances where he was forced to concede. But of course, Isagi has never conceded. The only times where I can think of Isagi willingly giving up on something is the goal opportunity at the start of the series, and then further down the line, abandoning his emotions to return to zero. But the returning to zero one feels quite minuscule when we know that Rin has also returned to zero, and these are necessary steps in order to grow further. And Isagi at the start of the series is now completely unidentifiable compared to the Isagi we now know. And that's all due to the fact that he simply didn't have the resources to grow without a team around him, as well as provide him the possibility of a mindset where he can become the world's best striker, and Blue Lock gave him that chance. Isagi is the prime example of a talented learner pursuing his goals even when things get extremely rough. Rin hasn't had to go through as much experience of trying to persevere due to him being a genius. Plus overall, he succeeded way more, but when he's facing against Isagi, he's failed way more. And Isagi knows Rin as one of the best players in Blue Lock, but now he stands toe to toe with someone he continuously tried to catch up to through constant trial and error, and he never lets it get a hold of him enough to stop taking the right path forward. Additionally, compared to Rin, Isagi has had to deconstruct himself, adjust, and develop to the environments around him consistently, as his adaptation quality allows him to do much more because of the natural skill gap between the two set up in the story. Isagi to me is the best character to fit the soul of perseverance. Next up is integrity. Not a lot of Blue Dot players inside or outside the facility are truly dishonest, but there's a lot more to integrity with the following definition. Integrity is a word used to describe a person's commitment to honesty and a willingness to do what's right. For example, a person who abstains from cheating, lying, or stealing would be considered a person who acts with great integrity. We can immediately eliminate Aiku, and I'm singling him out because he deserves to be called out. Who in the series truly represents truthfulness, not only to others but to themselves. In my personal opinion, I believe overall Baru could be argued as a candidate for this primary attribute. Of course, aside from the obvious ball stealing he does from his teammates, there is little to no discourse in his path of being king of the field. Integrity is to stay true and honest to yourself, in which he is undoubtedly one of the prime examples of this, especially after being challenged so heavily in the second selection. However, what makes picking Baru so difficult is that his personality is characterized by a strong sense of self-importance and a desire for absolute control over his surroundings and his career, often leading him to clashing with his teammates rather than showing integrity in the traditional sense of honesty and ethical behavior. But he also doesn't hide his intentions or attempts to deceive or manipulate. He's clear-cut and straight to the point as a person, and with his mindset, he's quite refreshingly simplistic. An example of this is when perceiving Rin as just another Isagi during the U20 match, which gave him a primary focus of using the heightened awareness and senses for an open goal spot on the field, which was an intent made very clear throughout the entire time he was on the field. Overall, I believe that Baru is deserving of being the representation of this soul's attribute. The next soul to discuss is patience. Now truthfully, this boiled down to those who are not impulsive and don't make rash decisions without proper reflection. And that of course is patience itself, which the definition states, patience is the person's ability to hang fire, wait something out, or endure something tedious without getting riled up. It could also be known as through waiting patiently you are rewarded, fortune coming to those who wait for it. A candidate for this to some people would be Nagi, but to me, he's the exact opposite of this trait. Sure, his playstyle is said to relax his entire body to cushion the ball, and that in itself is a patient procedure, but Nagi's entire downfall was all due to him being impatient. He simply didn't wait for Agi's methods to be fully implemented, and instead resorted to Reo in order to beat Isagi right then and there as soon as possible, which overall gave him no payoff in his development and led to him being eliminated. My personal candidates for this trait are actually Nico and Hiyori. Nico possesses the spatial awareness connective ability of Watchtower football, which gives him the control of space and allows him to anticipate movements. That gives him a sense of strategic patience for a weak spot on the opposite team's attacks. On the other hand, Hiyori has precise passes comparative to Sai Itoshi, and generally is more individually skilled than most players, allowing him to use more patient tactics to cut the ball through defenders either via dribbling or tight and accurate passing. Sai Itoshi was mentioned. Why isn't he a candidate? Well, I think what lets him down is his overall lack of consideration. He didn't take the time to factor in his brother Rin's emotions regarding the sudden change in his ideals. Instead, he ended up challenging Rin in a change of their dreams, rather than talking through what influenced him to switch positions and what convinced him of his new dream of being the world's best midfielder as rational. It's the fact he was never willing to talk about his emotions that were clearly burdening him, and instead looked to take action faster to move on than trying to resolve the looming negativity that has spoiled his enjoyment for being a striker ever since going to Spain. Anyway, overall, I believe that Nico is more suited for this primary emotion than Hiyori is, and this simply comes down to what's more embedded in Nico's way of playing. He has never been favoured as a striker due to his ever-changing perspective on what he enjoys, which gives him an open mindset. He specifically likes shutting down strikers because it gives his brain time to think and process in a more comfortable and controlled area of the field, pinpointing vital flaws and waiting to exploit them without getting too carried away or impulsive. And Hiyori comparatively has shown impulsive tendencies before, whilst Nico to me has been one of the most thoughtful players in the series. Also, Metavision just gives him another push, even though Hiyori also has that as well. Up next on the list is the trait of kindness. Now, if being honest, would it actually be entertaining for me to give this to someone like Nanase? I mean, I would label him as one of the kindest individuals in the facility, but I think we want a more relevant character than him. Pre-wildcard Kunigami to me is just not an option, considering I'm taking Kunigami's character as a whole, as it's relevant to associate his change in personality to the traits of these souls to stay consistent. Honestly, I want to put Don Lorenzo here. This is mostly due to the fact that not only is he an interesting character, but he's genuinely a sweetheart. If you have read his entry in the Neo Eagles Bible, you would understand why this is my perception of the character. And even in the manga, he's such a loving and wholesome-hearted individual who doesn't shy away from sharing his appreciation and joy for other people. And most commonly, those people are either Baru or Snuffy. Yeah, sure, it gets overlooked sometimes due to his greed-driven perspective to measure skill, but from his backstory we can see why he values finance due to the struggle he was put through, and overall, he doesn't tend to let that overshadow his other positive traits, as he seems to earn value through playing well and does not squash the other players to play to a high standard like other people would. But if it's truly that big of an issue for you Nanase fans, if he becomes more interesting, I will put him here instead. Our yellow soul up next is the representation of justice, otherwise known as just these fingers in your ass.
Fingers in his ass.
I wanted to make this video only to allocate the players to souls, but to give props where props is due, Ego is definitely the best representation of justice in Blue Lock. He isn't doing this project out of any profitable gains like the rest of the football clubs or associations within the series. He stands as the one man to capitalize on the potential of 300 players and giving them the chance at proving to the world that under his conditions, his perspectives, and his vision, he can show that even Japan, a team destined to never win the World Cup, can overcome the impossible. Plus, he has always been the underdog since the very start, overshadowed and undermined by the people with much more money tied to them, which gives them more power, so Ego can only combat it by exploiting their own greedy egos to come out on top time and time again. But since I will only be picking active players, he would be the highest honorable mention that I could provide for this trait, which leads me to the actual representative of justice in the series, that being Kunigami. Of course, we are swaying away from picking repeat characters like Isugi who have already been allocated to perseverance, so Kunigami was either the next step in this argument or argued to be even better. What would go against people thinking he embodies such an attribute now is his more anti-hero demeanor alongside quite a few other mental changes in his character, but the core values of what he's fighting for has not been lost. Sure, he gave up on his one-note perspective of the hero trip to fight for what's right, but what he's gained out of the wildcard is a whole new objective. Ego has personally constructed Kunigami to be this replica of Noel Noah, seemingly preparing Blue Lockers for the stages beyond the NEL, and whilst this would entice me to make a whole nother separate video in the future, in short, he's tasked in lifting up the other players as Ego stated. He's seen actively pushing Isugi to his upper limits through frustration and then providing him with collaboration because he's doing what's right to fight for Japan and fight for Blue Lock to be football's future. He's doing what's right as Ego has implanted him with his own perspective of justice through personal training and mentoring, meaning Kunigami's version of justice has become much more fine-tuned instead of the broad category of being everyone's hero. Because as said before by a certain pink antennae bastard, if you can't break others, how could you possibly react with an explosion? Basically, it jots down that Kunigami's way of playing is way too selfless to bring any sort of way for him to evolve further, so he needed to know how to break down someone like Isugi to build him back up stronger than ever for the best chances of their team winning and helping Blue Lock in the chase of their World Cup win. I hope that all made sense to you guys, but overall to me, Kunigami is like Batman, and Batman is way cooler than Superman. Next up is Bravery, and this one goes out to all of the people who are unapologetically themselves and are willing to take immense risks. I feel like that this one could be a bit more perspective based, so let's read out the definition for this one to get a clear understanding. Bravery is the quality of having or showing mental or moral strength to the face of danger, fear, or difficulty, essentially being courageous. It is the willingness to confront scary or dangerous situations despite any fear one may have, sometimes even involving extreme courage in battle. Now, I think a person of courage is to be someone to push through traumas and or personal strong feelings and attachments to come out stronger because of it. I considered Shido going here, but whilst I believe he's certainly brave, he hasn't faced any sort of scary adversity that he has needed to overcome, so it displays himself as a more naturally confident individual rather than an actively brave character. And until we see him reach a roadblock that he experiences likely his first ever semblance of dread or doubt, where he needs to take it head on and come out better because of it, I will not consider him for this attribute. So my three main contenders for this trait are Rin, Chigiri, and Kaiser. They have all experienced adversity to overcome. For Rin, it was trying to prove his brother wrong, that their dream needed to live on, but then later realized to become even stronger, he needed to drop his fixation towards trying to surpass his brother, and then he takes on the fixation of fighting to the death with Isugi, which was his prime direction to assist with long-term growth. Kaiser has not only faced the extreme troubles of physical abuse, but he has also had setbacks in dealing with mental scarring. And whilst I do perceive Kaiser to be a very brave individual for surviving that and making a name for himself on the world stage, people can also perceive him as slightly cowardice due to the way he ends up coping with this strain. He's not just damaged. He feels like he doesn't deserve an ounce of what he has earned, and the only way in which that negativity can be pushed down is through the malice of making other people feel worse. Of course, how you are raised influences what coping mechanisms you may have in your future, so understandably, he may not have known better when he was finally given the opportunity to do something separate from the abuse, but he would definitely have the finances to afford seeking some personal help to resolve his issues and to figure out why they're everlasting, even when he seemingly dropped those fixations, because clearly he failed in that department when he couldn't fully subject himself in being a machine for goals. Kaiser to me has a lot more to get through personally before I can consider him to represent the attribute of bravery. Finally for Chigiri, it was the adversity of trying to overcome the doubt and the risk of his injury in which stopped him from dreaming of being the world's best striker. Whilst Isagi was initially the catalyst to Chigiri awakening to run once more, Chigiri has taken on and provided himself constant care to support his leg through continuous strain, and has seemingly never fallen into doubt about his place in Blue Lock ever since. Whenever he would be faced with even more restrictions regarding his leg, he would now find ways around it to minimize risk so he can continue playing every game like it's his last, because one day it very well may be the case. So this is a very close call to say who out of these two deserve it more, but to be honest, the person to face more devastating adversity of the two, to me, is Chigiri. It's a physical adversity on the surface for sure, but it was also a mental blockage for him to ever perceive himself as a football player ever again. Rin threatened to quit football due to his brother's abandonment of their shared dream, but he was never at any actual risk of losing anything from football directly because of it. He had the natural talent that he didn't need his brother's approval for anything. Chigiri, on the other hand, was in serious torment when against his own doubts, and this is because what he suffered with would be a career-ending injury, and now it's more apparent to him than ever he needed that encouragement to continue on because he faced belittlement from the Wanama brothers. You can't discredit the way that someone starts being brave, because the fact that he needed an additional push from Isagi emphasizes how deep of a spiral Chigiri was in to begin with. I admire those who actually accept help. Sure, it's more brave to ask for help, but Chigiri was acknowledging that Isagi was right through his motivation of playing to tie up the game. And look, overall, we all expect Chigiri to hit another wall eventually, and whether or not it will be a career ender is unknown to us currently. He will find his way to conquer his fears once more, but this time he will know not to doubt himself because he's capable of amazing things and comes out stronger in the face of challenges trying to bound him. Now it's time for our final soul, the dominant emotion in which us as the player takes on in the pursuit of fight, flight, or mercy: determination. This is a complex one. I know what the meaning of this could be, but since it's the main character's soul in Undertale, the interpretation of it should be as close to the Undertale interpretation as possible. Undertale's determination is an aspect all humans possess and is a unique property that allows them to persist even after death. It also allows them to determine their own fate, giving them the power to choose outcomes for the universe. Then the actual definition is as follows: it is more than just a strong will, it's the commitment to see things through to the end. Regardless of the challenges and setbacks encountered along the way, it's the ability to keep pushing forward, fueled by the belief that the end result is worth every ounce of effort. Sounds awfully close to perseverance, doesn't it? Well, I had to look up the differences between the two to come to my final conclusion. A perseverant person regularly assesses his or her progress to adjust his or her methods according to the results obtained, all the while keeping the end goal in sight. Determination, on the other hand, is defined by the strength of inner resolve and firmness in the pursuit of a goal. It makes even more sense why Isagi is in fact perseverance more than determination, as his objectives are long-term based and he has the willingness to adapt and overcome to still focus on that unwavering goal. And I believe after 2 prior attempts, it's actually time for us to give it up for Rin. Comparatively to perseverance, yes, Rin has had to change himself and look back on what he needed to adjust on to be a better player, but every player does that. It's just that Isagi embodies that more than Rin, and of course the most out of the entire Blue Lock cast. So why is determination more fitting if he can also be argued for perseverance? Well, the two words aren't too dissimilar. Yes, their definitions are different, but both require a strong resolve in oneself to overcome challenges to reach their end goal. It's just that one is more specific to the individual changing to fit the circumstances, whilst the other involves determining your own future because you already have control over it due to your abilities. I actually believe the overall point I wanted to make is that perseverance and determination are ego-type qualities. This is of course a working theory based on my opinions, so you're free to disagree, but I think the freedom and restrictive arguments come into play here slightly. Freedom links to perseverance because it allows you to change and adapt to the environment around you, or change the circumstances you are in yourself, whilst restriction is the process of manipulating a situation in your favour and to rebel against rules and objectives. And the Undertale soul of determination rebels against the very act of death. Rin is violating the Geneva Convention! The most famous quote known by your player character's soul after dying is, "But it refused," after literally taking some sort of death beam to the forehead. It's going against all of our common sense, but guess what? A man like Rin does things against the norms of football, taking a shot much riskier because it's thrilling to him and it's part of his fixation, being labelled as unhinged, insane, and how his illogical gameplay can get him banned from football for life in an actual professional match. Overall, I think determination determination fits Rin very well. And there we have it. I personally find it a bit weird that Don Lorenzo stands out as the outcast amongst these Blue Lock facility players, so once again, I'm willing to accept Nanase being in that spot over time, or maybe even Gargamaru. But this is the final list of one singular Blue Lock character for each emotion that these Undertale souls represent. Let me know what you guys think and drop your own lists in the comments down below. This is all up to interpretation and perspective, so no answer with enough backing is truly wrong. So that means in respect of my opinion, please be understanding whatever you say will likely not convince me to change my mind. Happy 10th anniversary Undertale. I hope you all enjoyed a little more of an untraditional video idea, and if you did, I will remind you to hit that like and subscribe button for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and until next time, peace. Driving in my car right after a beer. Hey, that bump is shaped like a deer. D-U-I